You know, one of the most important aspects of deer management, but one I think's really pretty poorly understood by most hunters, is that of young buck dispersal. And all that is a young buck is born in a particular area and leaves that area typically between 12 and 18 months of age and finds a new home range. And that's simply nature's way of preventing inbreeding over time. The female offspring typically stay with their mother. That is the case in deer. The male offspring are forced to leave their natal or home range, birth area, and find a new home. And why that's so important to hunters is that many hunters are really, I think, very rightly focused on protecting their buck fawns, their button bucks, because those are obviously the bucks of tomorrow. But they get so hung up on it, they actually lose sight sometimes of the big picture. One is, are they reaching their antlerless harvest goal? But the other is, what's actually happening to those button bucks that they're saving? And the research has been very consistent, done all across the whitetails range, and it's shown that about 50 to 75% of all buck fawns born on a particular piece of ground disperse and leave that area, typically 1 to 5 miles away, sometimes 30 and 40 miles away, but typically 1 to 5 miles. And that's off of most hunters' properties. Most hunters hunt 200 or 300, 400 acres, maybe even 1,000 acres. But a couple of miles one way is well off of even that size of a property. So what's important is that you as a hunter are also receiving button bucks from your neighbors, because their buck fawns are dispersing also. So the key really is a neighborhood approach to managing those young bucks, because you're sending many of your bucks to your neighbors to grow up. They're sending you many of theirs. So it is important to protect those buck fawns, but just keep in mind that many that you're working on really aren't your bucks of tomorrow. Now, there's also some pretty cool research when it comes to the doe harvest side of things. And it's shown that if you have the opportunity to harvest an adult doe that has a buck fawn, or perhaps two at her side during hunting season, if you harvest that doe before that young buck is forced to leave its birth area, then the chances of that buck fawn staying on your property are much higher than they are of it leaving you. So in other words, you can keep more buck fawns on your property by selectively harvesting does that have buck fawns with them prior to that dispersal event. And what's going on with this dispersal event is that of the 50 to 75% of those fawns that do leave your property and grow up as bucks somewhere else, most of those do so at either 12 months of age, when the mother is giving birth to the next year's fawns, or at 18 months of age, when that mother is off trying to breed again the following fall. So they're either doing it at 12 months of age, wandering out into these new environments, or at 18 months of age. In fact, most do it at 18 months of age, and that's during hunting season. In fact, the peak dispersal months are October and November. What's going on across the whitetails range in October and November? And if you've ever had that year-and-a-half-old buck come wandering through your property looking clueless, wondering to yourself sometimes, man, it looks like he's never even been here before. He looks so clueless. There's a decent chance, in fact, he hadn't been there before, that he's actually in his dispersal event at that point in time. The good news is that once a buck hits 2.5 years of age, they pretty much throw out their anchor. So if you see a 2.5-year-old buck on your property, there's a good chance, a very high probability, obviously barring it getting harvested, that it's going to be an adult buck on your property next year.